Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the story of a single, powerful idea that completely redrew the map of Europe and really shaped the world we live in today. That idea? Nationalism. So, how in the world did we get from a beautiful dream of unity to a nightmare of global conflict? Well, the story starts not with a law or a treaty, but with a vision, a really hopeful utopian dream that was captured in a single remarkable work of art. Okay, before we go any further, we have to get our heads around the end goal here, the creation of what's called the nation-state. Now, this seems totally normal to us today, right? But back in the 19th century, the idea that a group of people with a shared identity should have their own country, that was absolutely revolutionary. So let's start with that dream. Our story really kicks off not on some battlefield, but in an artist's studio in 1848. A Frenchman named Frédéric Soriot imagined a world that just didn't exist yet. Now, what's so cool about this print is how it captures all the liberal hopes of the time. I mean, look, you can see the symbols of the old kings and emperors just shattered on the ground. People aren't subjects of a king anymore. They're citizens of a nation, marching together with their own flags, all toward liberty. And up above, you've got this heavenly blessing, symbolizing a brotherhood among all nations. It's just pure, uncut optimism. But here's the thing. Soriot's vision was exactly that, a dream. The reality of mid-18th century Europe was a continent of sprawling patchwork empires. You had the Habsburg Empire, for instance, which was this jumble of German speakers, Italians, Hungarians, Poles, Croats, you name it. The only thing holding them together was their loyalty to one single emperor. So, how does an idea like this leap from a piece of art into political reality? Well, the spark was lit in France, and believe me, it was about to set Europe ablaze. The French Revolution basically gave everyone the instruction manual. For the very first time, it showed that a nation wasn't just something you were born into, but something you could actually build. And you can see the steps right here. Power was literally transferred from the king to the people. You get new concepts like the fatherland to create a shared sense of belonging, and you reinforce it with new flags, new laws, and one common language. Now, the French weren't about to keep this incredible idea to themselves. Oh no. They declared it was their mission to liberate all the peoples of Europe. And Napoleon's armies became the unlikely delivery service for this idea. And this just perfectly captures the huge contradiction of the Napoleonic era. On the one hand, his armies brought these amazing modern reforms, right? They got rid of the old feudal system and created legal equality. But on the other hand, they were an occupying force, bringing heavy taxes, censorship, and forcing people into the army. So that initial excitement about being liberated, it soured pretty quickly into resentment. After Napoleon was finally defeated, the old powers of Europe tried their best to put the genie of nationalism back in the bottle. At the Congress of Vienna in 1815, they put all the old kings back on their thrones. But it was just too late. The idea was out there, and it started sparking independence movements, like in Greece, and inspiring revolutionaries like Giuseppe Mazzini to create secret societies to keep the dream of a unified nation alive. This quote from Austria's top diplomat, Duke Metternich, tells you everything you need to know. It shows you just how terrified the old guard was of this dream of nation-states. To them, Mazzini wasn't some freedom fighter. He was a radical extremist who represented a future they were absolutely desperate to stop. So that big wave of hopeful, liberal revolutions in 1848, they mostly failed to create lasting nations. And what came next was a new approach to nation building, one that was a lot more pragmatic and, frankly, a lot more ruthless. The gloves were off. So what's the big takeaway here? Idealism, debates, waving flags. It hadn't worked. Power and military force had crushed those revolutions. The question now was, who could actually get the job done where the liberals had failed? Well, let's take a look at Germany and Italy. In Germany, the answer was Prussia, and specifically its chief minister Otto von Bismarck. He famously said he had no time for speeches and majority votes. He believed the great questions of the day would be decided by iron and blood. And he meant it. He used Prussia's incredibly powerful army to fight and win 3 short, decisive wars, unifying Germany by force. Italy's story was a little different, but just as dramatic. It was really a team effort. You had the brilliant, cunning diplomacy of Count Cavour, who made an alliance with France to push out Austria.
And then you had the passionate, fiery military campaigns of the revolutionary hero Giuseppe Garibaldi. It was that combination that finally stitched the Italian nation together.
And this right here is the big shift. The crucial point is that nationalism went from being a bottom-up, people-powered movement to a top-down, state-driven project. It wasn't just an ideal being shouted on the streets anymore. It was a powerful tool used by kings and ministers to build modern, powerful countries. All right, let's move into our final section, because this is where we see how this powerful idea, which started with so much promise, begins to twist and transform into something much more aggressive and dangerous. You see, by the late 19th century, that idealistic liberal spirit was pretty much gone. Nationalism had become this narrow, intolerant creed. It wasn't about liberating people anymore. Oh no, now it was all about proving your nation was superior to everyone else's. And that drove a fierce competition for colonies, for resources, and for military might. And there was no place on Earth where this was more explosive than in the Balkans. As the old Ottoman Empire started to crumble, all these different ethnic groups began to fight for their own independence. But these brand new nations were incredibly jealous and suspicious of each other. And to make it all worse, the great powers of Europe were all meddling in the region, trying to grab influence for themselves. It was an absolute recipe for disaster. So you had this toxic mix, right? Aggressive nationalism in the Balkans, intense imperial rivalry between the major powers, and a whole complicated web of military alliances that locked everyone together. It basically set Europe on an unavoidable collision course. And it all led here. The dream of nations, which had been twisted by the ambition of empires, finally plunged the world into the catastrophe we now know as the First World War. When you think about it, it's the ultimate paradox. This idea that began in an artist's imagination, a dream of liberty, unity, and brotherhood, ended up fueling one of the most destructive conflicts in all of human history. It leaves us with a powerful legacy and a really heavy question that, honestly, we are still grappling with today.